Insight now from our panel of experts. Justin Baer is the Wall Street correspondent at the Financial Times, and securities fraud attorney Andrew Stoltmann joins us as well. So they're going to hand this over to the officials to see whether or not there's going to be any kind of prosecutions, folks. Andrew, Hampton used the phrase borderline indictment. Will it turn into a full indictment? Should it?
Well, I think it could. I think the senator and the bipartisan committee has laid out a very clear path for an indictment. I think virtually of Goldman Sachs and a number of the senior executives, including Lloyd Blankfein. So I think it's a huge, huge problem. If what they allege in that report is true, it's a huge problem for Goldman Sachs.
Give me a specific. They would be charged with what?
Probably fraud and fraud-related charges, and also lying to Congress. There were a number of examples that were provided where the CEO of Goldman Sachs supposedly misled Congress, and that would be an obstruction of justice charge.
Justin, you've read this. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it ultimately depends what the Justice Department does with this information. Now, it's important to note that Goldman did settle one case with the SEC last year. It was widely believed by those in the market and also in the legal community that suit also included other CDO mortgage issues. And so to the extent to which that settlement covered some of the ground that was included in the subcommittee report, that remains to be seen. Now, it's also important to note that Senator Levin did strongly dispute that and made it clear that the SEC and, of course, the Justice Department could review any of the information.
Andrew, how much of this, though, is just that Goldman is the punching bag of Wall Street and none of the big banks have been indicted yet, and that's basically what the public wants to see?
Well, the public does want to see that, but there's also a reason why Goldman Sachs' conduct has come into question. I mean, they have engaged in conduct that, if it isn't criminal, it's real close to criminal, and it's a huge, huge problem for the company. There's a reason why we have this great recession, and the major brokerage firms and banks are a big, big part of that. I think Levin's report really makes that clear.
Just on this more substantive question, Andrew, about whether or not the $550 million that they already got fined by the SEC kind of closes the CDO argument overall. What's your legal view there? Because they're going to present marketing materials for Hudson, aren't they? Which is another synthetic CDO in which they had $6 million of equity, but a $2 billion short.
Yeah, I mean, I think the conduct with respect to the creation of these CDOs is the biggest problem Goldman Sachs faces. It's a significant problem for them. There's such a level of detail in that report. If you read that, it becomes extremely problematic for the company. And
but that's not what I'm asking you, Andrew. Do you think that the $500 million they've already paid?
Not enough.
It was not a settlement for everything.
No, absolutely not. It will absolutely settle the civil side of it, but the criminal side is completely different. And I think that's where Goldman's real liability rests.
Justin, why is the stock down today? Is it down because all the other financials are down, or is it because of this and that this is a real problem for them, not just a PR problem?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. I think this certainly the conviction of Senator Levin's words that came out of yesterday, I think made it clear that he expected law enforcement to proceed, that sure that there had been the sharing of information between those agencies in last year's case with the SEC, but that the information that his subcommittee came up with in their report was something that demanded their attention.
Andrew, let me ask you one final question on your assertion that it was the likes of Goldman that was at the heart of the financial crisis and it shouldn't have behaved the way it did. A very wise man said to me quite recently, when I buy stock in Goldman, I expect them to behave like pigs. I expect them to be not illegal, but I expect them to basically be playing every angle on where the world now sits. Isn't that the nature of the system that we have, that somebody will always occupy that position and profit from it on this side of the law?
Well, there's no question about that, but there's a very, very fine line about acting aggressively on behalf of shareholders and crossing the line into criminal conduct. Many people, including myself, think they crossed that line into criminal conduct, and it remains to be seen whether the Department of Justice will bring charges. If I was a betting man, I'd say yes.
Do you have this much conviction when it comes to the ratings agency? How about the people who worked at the Office of Thrift Supervision? Should they be going to jail?
No, they shouldn't. But there are a number of other there are a number of other bad actors in this, but the regulators were more incompetent. The allegations against Goldman Sachs is fraud, and I think there's a big, big difference between those two.
I don't think the allegations are incompetence. They look the other way. They knew exactly what was going on, and the ratings agencies They're not going to. You can't argue that they were incompetent. They knew exactly what they were getting into. They just wanted that revenue stream.
Well, at least with respect to the regulators, I think we just have an opinion of difference. I mean, I just think that they weren't able to do the job. They didn't have enough manpower.
That goes to my point that Goldman is easy to single out.
There's a reason for that.
But because of the shot that you saw on Capitol Hill with everybody raising their hand, there may be a reason for it. But to Michelle's point, there were a lot of other players in this financial crisis. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the ratings agencies, as Michelle mentioned. There were a lot of other players. Why is it simply Goldman? There were a lot of other big money center banks that were doing loans that perhaps had positions on that were not appropriate.
Because Goldman was the leader in the creation of these CDOs, and unlike many other banks, they weren't betting against their clients, betting that these things would fail and not telling the clients. I think that's a big, big part of the fraud that was engaged in. And don't forget also the allegations about Lloyd Blankfein lying in front of Congress. Those are two independent causes of potential criminal liability.
Justin, Andrew, good discussion. Thank you.